90 days, a court had given medics and the state to negotiate a collective bargaining agreement had not yet elapsed. All right, thank you so much for staying with us. We continue with our coverage here on News Center. Remember, on our Twitter poll this morning, we're asking you, do you support the strike by health workers here in the country? Would like to hear your thoughts on it. Tweet me at Betty M. Kallo or use the hashtag News Center. I've been reading some of your tweets. There are very many coming through. Keep them coming as we continue to discuss this issue, this serious issue that pertains our health sector in the country. Very many patients have been affected by this. And so we're asking you if you support the strike by the health workers in Kenya's public hospitals. All right, so apart from that, we're also keeping an eye on developments taking center stage at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Like I mentioned, the technical staff are staging a strike, citing poor pay and burnout. And like I mentioned, we'll be speaking to our Abby Agina to give us the latest on that. We also understand that there are quite a number of flights which have been cancelled following the strike, and is going to be giving us an update on that. All right, so let's now go back to another developing story. And there is public outrage following fresh revelations from the Auditor General's report that 273 out of the 290 elected MPs in Kenya cannot fully account for a total of 4 billion shillings. Now, the report reveals that this amount was lost or stolen in the MP's first year in office. Mark Namaswe with the details.
A report by the Auditor General Edward Ouko indicates current MPs looted or wasted 3.85 billion shillings from the CDF kit in their first year in office in 2013. Nearly all regions across Kenya have been represented in the misuse of public funds. In Nairobi, Dagoretti North constituency under Honorable Simba Arati cannot account for 74.8 million shillings lost in 2013 alone. Others being Starehe, Embakasi North and Kamkunji constituencies. In the Rift Valley, Samuel Moroto's Kapenguria constituency takes the lead, where some 63.4 million shillings cannot be traced. Samburu North and Subukia constituencies are also mired in the same dilemma. The Mount Kenya region also found a slot on the infamous list. Francis Kigos Gatundu North reportedly losing 76 million. Kirinyaga Central and Buri constituencies also making the list. The bastions of opposition politics, Nyanza and Western Kenya, through MPs Aduma Award of Nyakash, could not satisfy the Auditor General of the whereabouts of 69.8 million. Nyando, Lurambi, Malava and Likuyani also joining the queue. Ukambani and the coastal region also took their turn. Mavoko constituency led by Patrick Makau losing 33.9 million. Matungulu, Kangundo, Nyali and Msambweni also getting listed. And this has not escaped the attention of fellow as well as named legislators.
It does not matter whether you are a governor. I think the most important thing as a leader who has resources, you must manage your resources and be accountable to those resources.
Most of those members of parliament have no direct influence over CDF. CDF ni pesa ambao unachukua kwa shule, unawacha check kama ni ya 1 million na unaondoka.
The Northeastern region through Isiolo North legislator Joseph Lomwa lost 99 million shillings in 2013. The trend spreading to Lafey, Banisa and Garissa Township constituency, captained by Parliament Majority Leader Hon Duale.
Wengi wao pesa yao ni kujifaidisha wenyewe na marafiki zao. Si ati ndiye ya kusaidia mwananchi.
Nikiangalia hii naona watu wote wamekula hii pesa. Na wangefaa warudisha hii pesa. Manake hii pesa imerudisha nchi yetu nyuma sana.
The monies reportedly started vanishing soon after Treasury disbursed the 23 billion to the CDF kitty. The most common tactics used by MPs were through employing relatives, fictitious sitting allowances, and financing seminars. In Gideon Mungaro's Kilifi North constituency, 2.5 million was withdrawn, then the CDF team deleted the transaction from all records. In David Weres Matungu constituency, a chemist won and was paid for a road graveling contract. But some legislators are not taking the dossier lying down.
Mimi Oscar Sudi, nataka watume auditors kutoka pembe zote la Kenya. Na wakipata hata shilingi 10 Oscar Sudi alichukua, siwezi simama na nifungwe.
The audit reports have surfaced at a time the fate of the CDF kitty lies in the hands of the Court of Appeal, expected to make a ruling whether CDF should be scrapped or not come February 2017. Among the few perceivably clean constituencies in the reports are Sotik, Rarieda and Gem. Mark Namaswa, KTN News.
4 billion shillings. All right, so let's now have a conversation around that. Let me bring in Irungu Horton, joining me from our City Centre studio. He is the Associate Director of the Society for International Development. Thank you so much, Irungu, for joining us this morning. I mean, it is such an unfortunate, situation. We're talking about, a health crisis here in the country, but also in the same breath, we're talking about 4 billion shillings, having been lost through CDF. What is your take on this?
I think you're correct to connect these two very important things that are happening today. I mean, it is astounding, the kind of figures that we're seeing from the Auditor General's report of 2013. One of the concerns, I think, for most Kenyans would be that, these are really figures of 2 years ago. So one wonders what's been happening in the last 2 years. But I think the first thing to recognize is that the CDF, corruption in CDF is not a new thing. We've seen over the years since it was formed in 2003, anywhere between 10% and 16% losses through corruption, wasteful expenditure, inflated costs and services, and also preferential treatment to contractors that are close to the MPs. But this time it seems to be much more shocking in the sense that 273 MPs out of 290, with only 12 constituencies that seem to have a clean bill of health. One really must be concerned about whether or not we need to actually do away with the CDF altogether.
I mean, that's a bigger conversation. But even before we get to that, I mean, do you think that Kenyans are getting used to this, corruption scandals? Now we're talking about 4 billion probably, have been lost. Do you think that, it's a tiring conversations that, Kenyans are now getting used to the fact that, you get into government, you loot as much as you can, and you leave if you ever get to leave?
I think that attitude would be cynical and perhaps self-defeating in the sense that what we would essentially be doing is colluding with thieves to grab taxpayers' monies. And what's worse perhaps is that cynicism leaves you with not even the opportunity to benefit materially from that. You are being overtaxed, you are being underserved, and on top of that, your public services are being looted. So I think that would be a self-defeating position to take. I think Kenyans are still angry about what's happening. They are completely disaffected with the political spectrum. And I think this particular finding will show itself in the electoral process next year. I'm not convinced that Kenyans will have forgotten this by next year.
All right, we'll get to the elections shortly, but you brought up the issue, that has been surrounding the CDF. Back in February 2015, the High Court ruled that this fund was unconstitutional, but still, Treasury went ahead and disbursed this money. Money's about 23 billion. Right now, we're waiting for a final ruling from the Court of Appeal. Right. Which way should we go in regards to that appeal? As from where you sit, what would be the favorable ruling in regards to CDF? Does it help anybody? Remember that it was brought in to help needy students, spur developments in the grassroots levels.
Well, personally, I think the position of the Society for International Development is that the CDF, as a mechanism for devolution, has run its course. With devolution, we really have alternative ways of being able to deliver services to the population. And although we are seeing similar corruption scandals within the counties, I think what's important for us is to begin to close these loopholes so that we can begin to provide citizens oversight and legislative oversight. I think the inescapable decision that we must come to really is that legislators do not make good managers, and that they should be, essentially returned to the legislative space so that they can look at bill making and oversight rather than attempting to manage public monies themselves. The immediate action I think that citizens could do is they can call their member of parliament, they can demand a ward sitting or a constituency sitting with the member of parliament, and actually cause the member of parliament to explain under what circumstances this has happened. And I think more interestingly would be to seek assurance that over 2014, 2015, we are not going to see the same kind of agreements. I think that conversation needs to now happen in all 290 constituencies in order for us to be sure that we're not going to see a similar report in 2017 November, which unfortunately for some of the MPs may be too late. Right. You've talked a bit about the Court of Appeal. And I think a favourite judgment for the Court of Appeal in 2017, I think February is the date by which that appeal would be heard, would be for them to rule that the CDF is no longer a legal, constitutional mechanism for providing services. And I think that would do the country a favour. It would also allow for members of parliament to really focus on what they do best, which is placing bills before the House and providing oversight.
All right, let's also talk about these reports. Irungu, I'm sure you've been watching, KTN News. We're talking about 47 days of accountability. You have all these audit reports coming from the Auditor General, shocking details, and revelations about how some monies were lost in the counties. But, what is the end game? Because, it's like these reports come out. There's just one that has just recently come out about the IFMIS system. It shocks us as Kenyans. We harbor that shock for a few days, then we move on, and then there's another report and another report. I mean, what is the end game of these reports? Because there's nothing that seemingly is happening.
Well, the predictable future, perhaps, is that we will continue to see scandal upon scandal, sometimes mega scandal upon mega scandal being perpetuated in front of us. And the population will increasingly become more and more clear that their lives and their resources are no longer in safe hands. Now, that can play out in two ways. In terms of the elections and the ballot box, you may find a large number of people, traditional base within Jubilee, saying that they may not be able to go and vote for the opposition, but they will definitely not vote for the existing leadership. And that's one way that that could happen. It might also swing in favor of the opposition if the opposition is in a position to be able to declare how they would manage these scandals better. What would be a alternative way of resolving the corruption that we've seen here? So that's one potential scenario. The second scenario is that we start to see a number of strikes from different service providers, and I think the nurses and the doctors is perhaps the beginning of this. You start to see a number of citizens claiming that they will not pay their taxes because they have no faith in how the taxes are being managed. And also you will start to see a growing lawlessness in terms of the way they work. So there are a number of different scenarios, but all of them, unfortunately, unless the 47 governments and the national government are able to curb this very fast and decisively, will all be fairly disruptive for this country.
All right, very, very briefly, Irungu, do you think Kenyans are angry enough such that come 2017, when they go to the ballot, they'll be able to win off the good leaders and the bad leaders? Do you think we're angry enough? Have we gotten to that point now?
Well, here's the thing, Betty. If we look at South Korea, if we look at Tunisia, many of those countries were not considered to be angry enough, but you saw an insurrectionist wave sweep those governments from power. It is possible in this day and age, really, for one person, a one-person protest to turn into a 1 million person march or a demonstration, which would cause a tremendous strain on the credibility of this government and the 47